Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scripture for June the 5th. Your readings today find you starting a new book, 1 Kings, and you read the first chapter there. And then we have Acts chapter 4, where we see Peter and John in front of the Sanhedrin. Then we read Psalm 124 and Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24. Now, as always, we're going to talk about a new book of the Bible, and this will be 1 Kings, but we're actually going to touch on 4 books of the Bible: 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Now, these are history books, and these are actually history books that detail the kingdom of Israel after the death of David. And 1st Kings spends a lot of time talking about Solomon. And then at the end of 1st Kings, we see Solomon's reign taken over by his son Rehoboam. And at that point, the kingdom of Israel splits into 2 nations. And so 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles spend time talking about the history of Israel and the history of Judah. Beforehand, it used to be just Israel and just Judah, and Israel and Judah were the same, and now it's going to be just Israel and just Judah. 2 different factions. We'll get into those details a little bit. But here's where 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles are important to talk about at the same time, because they're talking about the same history. They're parallels to each other, okay? So when you're reading 1st Kings and 1st Chronicles, they're paralleling each other and they're giving direct history. However, there are some differences, and these are what we need to pay attention to. Kings, the 2 Kings histories, pays attention to the northern tribe, to the northern kingdom, the kingdom that will be known as Israel, okay? And it will address those kind of things. The 1st and 2nd Chronicles pays attention to the line of David, the messianic line that eventually Jesus will come out of. So when you're looking at these 2 different sets of books, and we're going to look at each one and we're going to read through each one, so just know that history-wise, we're going to start here at 1st Kings and we're going to travel over here, and then at some point you're going to start at 1st Chronicles and you're going to come and you're going to travel back over here, but you're going to have a different focus. 1st Kings spends a lot of time talking about the northern kingdom. 1st and 2nd Kings spends a lot of time talking about the northern kingdom and the sins, and then it'll eventually tail off and show the end of what happens to Israel and what happens to the people of the kingdom of Judah, the southern people, the southern nation, here eventually. But it is a history book, and so you're going to see a lot of accountings and a lot of various things that are going to happen. And these are all very important details because it's going to show what happens for several hundred years for the kingdom of Israel. Shows the split, and then it's going to show what happens to Israel and Judah, and then it's going to lead all the way up to the exile, and you're going to hear promises, and you're going to see promises, and you're also going to start seeing some familiar prophet names. And we'll get into the prophets later. You're going to get to those guys, but just know that when they start referencing people like Elijah and Elisha and people like that, you're going to read more about them. You're going to see information about them. You're going to also hear about other prophets like Jeremiah, and so on and so forth. Know that that's going to be all intertwined. But we're in the middle of the history aspect of the Old Testament. These have been historical accounts. Up to this point, you had Genesis and Exodus that were history books, and then you had a couple of the law books and those of the Pentateuch. And then you picked it back up with Joshua and Judges, and Ruth was kind of a history book, but it was more of just an aside story. And then you hit 1st and 2nd Samuel, and they showed the history of David and the beginning of the kings and the line of kings. And now you're going to continue with that line of kings as well and go on through there. Now, as for the author of the book, nobody really knows for sure, though funnily enough, Jews attribute it to Jeremiah. That Jeremiah was the guy that wrote it, but truth is no one really knows, and it doesn't really matter who wrote it. The question is, though, is it accurate? And for a while, people argued that one. Hey, this didn't really happen. However, archaeologists have discovered significant results over the past several decades that have continued to verify the historical accuracy of the Bible, the Old Testament in particular. And so we can read these with confidence and assurance that these aren't made up people, that these aren't people that were just used for allegory. These were real life people. The kings that we're going to read about were the kings of Israel, and later the kings of Israel and Judah. Okay, so as you read it, just look at the history of it. Let's see God's grace. Let's see how it unfolds. And so 1 Kings 1, that's going to lead you into the transition from David to Solomon. And once again, we see wreckage on the runway from David that's causing issues and causing problems. And so read that, and we'll begin looking at the wisest king in the history of Israel in the coming days. All right, that's it for now. We'll talk more tomorrow.